And I've always been interested in nature. I spent much of my childhood climbing trees, looking at rocks, shooting catapults, throwing spears, catching snakes. To be fair, not much has changed apart from now I do it for a degree. So, there was one time I was up on a mountain and I was swanning along, minding my own business, and I fall off the cliff and I break my ankle. Now, I was there with my mates. I didn't have a phone. He had a phone, but he didn't have any signal. What do? It's 4 miles back. I had to walk for 4 miles on a broken ankle back. Now, this wasn't so bad at the time, but what I found is if you sit down, if I sit down just to have a rest, your ankle swells up. And then you find it incredibly difficult to walk. So it wasn't the fact that I had to walk. My ankle was forcing me to walk. Now, so I then went back to the hospital, had it checked, put it in plaster. Possibly the worst idea I've ever had, because plaster casts, I don't know how many of you have had them. Plaster casts are the itchiest thing alive. So I was there scratching like mad. Couldn't do anything for a week or something. And eventually, after about 3 days, I ended up cut it off. But in those 3 days, I didn't have anything to do. It was the summer holidays. And so I sat down and I watched TV. And I was thinking, well, what could I have done to stop me falling off my cliff and breaking my ankle? Apart from not walking so close to the edge. I thought, I normally did a walking stick. I normally had a hiking stick, about yay big. And I thought, well, that would have stopped me, because that is an extra hole, an extra leg, really. You can stand like that, you've still got 2 things on the ground. And then I thought, well, what happens if it went worse? What happens if I'd broken a leg? What happens if I'd fallen, hit my head? My mate, bless him, he's daft as 2 brushes. He's useless anyway. What happens if I hit my head? What happens if I'd have been on my own? It was in the newspaper today that a girl in Australia, travelling, she was on her motorbike, moped, and this happened to her. She went off a cliff, hit her head, died. And I thought, well, I can't do a lot if I'm dead. So I thought, what if I just hit my head and knock myself out? And I thought, what then? 6 hours later, I come to, blood pouring out of my head. It's dark. What would I have done? Broken ankle, dark, concussed. I thought, well, I just spent a very, very cold and very, very lonely night on a mountainside. Which I tell you from experience isn't fun, even without being concussed and a broken ankle. But I thought, well, what would have stopped me doing that? And I remember back to my scout days. And I never used to take them very seriously. But I thought, well, what did they always say? They'd always said, carry a lighter. And they always say, carry a piece of string. Now this lighter was a gift, and it just goes with the suit, and this piece of string I'm forever breaking my shoelaces, so it comes in very handy. But if I'd have had a lighter, I'd have been able to light a fire. Maybe it wouldn't have been so cold. Granted, I wouldn't have been able to do much. But saying that, if there was a fire, a gamekeeper would have come. Because you know that fires. And I say, if you do have a light of fire, do the same. Now, this is all a bit Bear Grylls-y and whatnot. And so I'll take it one step further. Who here remembers Hurricane Katrina? Yeah? Yeah? Now, Hurricane Katrina, it was a hurricane, obviously. It happened in New Orleans, I can't remember how long ago. And here, not there, sorry, in America, when this hurricane hit, it was chaos. Now they say that society is 3 days, 72 hours, away from total anarchy. Now, I'm looking at your faces, you don't believe that. You're thinking, how can society break down 3 days? Well, just a little thought experiment. Picture Bristol. Picture all the shops in Bristol. In them shops, picture how many bottles of water have we got? How many bottles of orange juice have we got? How many bottles of apple juice? How many bottles of milk? And then think There's 600,000 people in Bristol. How long do you think all that would last? You can live 3 days without water. And I thought about this, I've done a bit of maths as well, and you can take my word for it, more or less, that there is not enough water, in Bristol to last Bristol for 1 day. Now, Hurricane Katrina strikes. What happens in a hurricane? You've got massive winds. You destroy everything. So you destroy power lines. New Orleans completely underwater. What else does a hurricane do? It brings water levels up. It rains. What happens in floods? So it causes floods. What happens in floods? Sewage mixes with all the tap water, so the sewage is going to flood. The drains blow up. Throw them two things together. You can't drink tap water. You've got no electricity to boil it. What do? You drink bottled water. What happens when we have just ascertained that there isn't enough water in Bristol, New Orleans, to last a day? 72 hours to get to a client. So, in the good old scout tradition, what would have happened if all those people in New Orleans had just a little few boxes, not a few boxes, a few bottles of water? They would have lasted longer, which would have given the services a reasonable amount of time, and more time, to get supplies to. Now, I'm talking all about be prepared. Some people might think that I should go on to the nuclear wars here and say, how can we survive a nuclear war? And I did think about talking about that actually, but then I thought you'll think I was crazy. But bring it closer to home. Bristol, 10 miles south. What happened there? Floods. Every single year, floods. What happens in Scotland? Snow. As you know, snow. How deep does the snow get to in Buxton? Pretty deep. My dad once saw it was up here. Snow this deep, genuinely this deep. I've seen it where it's this deep. Snow can leave you stranded. Last week we had a snowstorm, a snow thunderstorm. I don't know what I can't remember what the term is, but it was a thunderstorm that was snow instead of rain. So again, you've got the whole destroying things, destroying the power line. What happens if a tree falls into a power line? You've got no power. You've got the whole trees falling into the power lines. Sorry. You've got the whole blackouts again. But then, as you know, this is Britain. We don't do things by half measures. If one snowflake falls in London, you're laughing. You know exactly what happens. Total standstill. Total standstill. So this one snowflake falls on London. Somewhere else you get 3 foot, and a power line goes down. This person here, cut off, completely stranded. What are they going to do? They have to be prepared. They have to know that they can. They have to know that they have water. They have to know that they've got food. The government, both ours and the American government, recommends that in your house you keep 3 days worth of food and water. Nothing extreme, because as I said, 3 days is anarchy. They also recommend in your car you keep a blanket, you keep a gallon of petrol or diesel, you keep a torch. Because anybody can run out of petrol. Anybody's car can break down. On the way to a field trip once, this was a car done by the university. Ran out of bloody petrol. That was Sebastian. What do? You have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for what can happen, and you have to be prepared for what you don't think can happen. The last thing on my mind, anytime that I go into the mountains, is I'm going to fall over and break down. But I still, always, because I've done it and I know and I've learned from experience, always carry a little bandage, not a little bandage. Because I know that if I do break my ankle, I don't want to break my ankle, which just happens to be the most common accident, the most common incident in the wilds, that it will certainly help to get me back. I was up in Scotland for 6 weeks or so doing mapping as part of my degree. And And here it was, well, Bristol runs it so that you are there with another person. It says it's independent, but there's two of you for this health and safety. Every other university I met there, it was a popular place for universities, quite geologically rich. Everybody else was on their own. And I thought, I like walking. I go out on my own and I like it. And I think, I know I can get home for one reason or another. And I'm thinking, they don't even have a first aid kit. They don't have anything to get them home. There was once, it was last year I believe, there was one guy, he died sadly. Some people might say it was natural selection. But he went to Mount Everest, he went to Ben Nevis. He attempted Ben Nevis in this time of year in trains. He attempted it with not much more clothing than I'm wearing now. No, he didn't. He lived. He lived. And he was that. Through sheer luck, mountain rescue found him, half dead, frostbitten, on the side of a mountain. He wasted their time. Some people say it's natural selection, if you would have. People say it was his own downfall. But he wasted their mountain rescue's time when they could have been rescuing somebody that got into difficulty through no fault of their own. He was not equipped